Hi, I'm Danny Elliott, and this is First Time for Everything, a podcast where I talk with really interesting people from all walks of life about their first time doing something. These people started out just like you and me, interested in something and wanting to try it. Maybe they were a little bit scared, but something in them made them take that leap towards their dreams. I really hope these conversations inspire you to step out of your comfort zone and go after whatever it is you've been wanting to do. And who knows, maybe someday we'll be talking about your first time here soon. Hi, first timers. I'm so excited to have Jamila Souffrant on the podcast today. Jamila is a personal finance expert who helps people reach financial independence through her website and hugely popular podcast, Journey to Launch. We talk about Jamila's path to financial freedom, having moved to the States as a child from Jamaica, all the way to buying her first apartment in New York City at the ripe old age of 22, which is just unbelievable. Jamila came in and completely lasered some financial wizardry into our brains to help us out wherever we're at on our money journeys. And I just had such a great time learning from this incredible woman, and I think you will too. Welcome to First Time Thinking About Money Seriously with Jamila Souffrant. All right, Jamila, thank you so much for being here. Can you give us a brief background on just who you are?
Yes, well, thank you for having me, Danny. So I'm Jamila Souffrant, the host of the Journey to Launch podcast, creator of Journey to Launch, where I talk about the journey to reach financial freedom and independence. And so it's part motivational, educational, and practical steps, but I really like to focus on the process, like the journey that it takes to get to where you want to be, not just the destination. And I love talking about not just money, like money is the fuel, but just life and what it takes for us to reach our dreams. And honestly, money is a big part of that.
Yes. Oh my gosh, for sure. Definitely. And as this episode is going to be first time thinking about money seriously, when was the first time you started thinking about your finances seriously, or just how that will affect your future and the life you wanted to build for yourself?
It's funny because I think it happens in stages. So, in the context of the way I talk about it now, financial independence and like this more intentional part of my journey, that didn't happen until my early 30s, but I've always been aware of money. I think like most people, like maybe you're not thinking about budgeting or like investing when you're thinking about money, but you're thinking about the things that you want or what you don't have and the life you kind of aspire to have. So I was raised by a single mom, and she came here to the United States. She's Jamaican. I was born in Jamaica. So she came here with not much. So her and my grandmother and my family came here without anything. And so while we grew up not having a lot, she did pour into me. Education was key and all these things. But I realized that, wow, when I grow up, like one of my things was I want to be rich. I want to have money because I don't want money or the lack of money to limit me from what I want to do. And so I've always been aware of that. And the good thing, even though she didn't have a lot of money, her and my grandmother really stressed saving. So I've always had this thing about saving because of them. Like, it doesn't matter how much money you get. If you get $1, you save a penny. You have to save something. And so I do remember opening up my first bank account when I was younger, and that has stuck with me. And I think, as immigrants and as, when you don't have a lot, saving is important. Like, it's the only way, if you are trying to get a little bit ahead, that you can do that in this country or anywhere. And so for me, that was like my first initial seeing what money could do, what the lack of it, what that impact was, made having money important to me. But it wasn't until like I got to my 20s that I actually started to make real money. And I did spend money in a way in which it did help set me up for things, but I also wasn't that intentional with it. And again, it wasn't until my early 30s where I felt stuck in a job that I did not love, in a long commute, that I said to myself, there must be a better way to use my money, to use my life in a way that I can be proud of and that I can enjoy. And so that's kind of what led me on the path of financial independence and reading blogs and podcasts, and then eventually starting Journey to Launch to document what I was doing. But then eventually it turned into me now helping others find their path to financial independence.
I love that so much, and I relate to that so much too because I feel like I I come from a similar background financially. My parents, when I was small, like really did not have a ton of money. Like my mom has told me this story a few times about how at one point she didn't even have money to buy like a 25-cent bottle of like baby food. It was like that dire, and they worked really hard to kind of get themselves out of that position. And from a child too, I also knew that I wanted to create something more stable. But then the career that I chose was a 1099 income, touring and kind of living gig to gig. And I found myself getting into this cycle of getting into a lot of debt when I was in between tours, and then making a ton of money when I was touring, paying off that debt, and then falling back into debt again because I didn't have savings. So savings for me too was kind of the first step. And I think a few years ago, my early 30s, same timeline, some friends had suggested we get together with a financial planner. Shout out to Brett Waring, our guy. And we were sort of like, we don't deserve that. Like, we're not in a place where we have any money to plan with, you know? And one of the first things he said to us was, you need to start saving, like, pay yourself first, you know, before you go pay off this debt, put something away for yourself so you don't find yourself in this kind of cycle, you know?
Right. I mean, it's important. And I think because there's so many layers to this, I think it can be overwhelming for people when they hear about just all the things it takes to become financially independent or secure, because a lot of it is not actually, it's not a one size or one thing you do once, right? Like you said, like you pay off the debt, but unless you have the habits and behavior behind it, you can get back into debt. And
Yes.
there's always levels to it. So someone can say, oh, I'm saving, but then the next level after saving is investing, because you
Mm.
can't save yourself to wealth. And I think once people hear this, if you're not in tune with this, it's just like, all right, like, what's the point? Like, this is too much. Just forget it. I just want to enjoy my life. And
Yeah.
so, I think it's something that I think everyone comes upon it. Like, we are all on this journey, whether we know it or not. Like, just like we get older, like whether we like it or not, we are all on this financial journey, because ultimately, we're going to get to a place, even if we're ignoring it, it's going to come for us, or it's going
Mhm.
to give you a situation that arises where we can't ignore it anymore. And
Yes.
so it's best just to, no matter where you are, kind of like be just live in that, and let the shame go of whatever you didn't do or you think you could have been, so you can start making the proper changes and just choices to help you get to a better place.
That and I love that you can't save yourself to wealth. That is so. That's also something our financial planner has said to us too. He's like, like now that your savings are beefed up enough, we need to start like moving with this. We can't just let it sit here. But getting circling back to the point you just made about shame, uh, how do we kind of move through that shame? Because I feel like so many people beat themselves up about getting into debt or not making enough money, or overspending, and because they're trying to keep up appearances. And there's also, I feel, even some shame with people who do have money and not wanting to make other people feel like they're rubbing it in their faces, you know?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on kind of moving through that?
I think it's important to recognize that we all have money hangups. Like you said, even if you have a lot of money, it's like one of those things when rich people say, oh, like it's not the money, right? And like people who don't have as much will say, well, then if that's the case, like, woe
Yeah,
is me, give it to me, But
right.
really, like you're going to experience like issues and or your money demons, or just like the way you were raised with money, the negative feelings you have around money, like that is all going to happen whether you have it or not. It's going to happen whether you're an expert or not. So I know there's some people who basically are perfect. I don't know those people with their money, but like I'm not even perfect with my money. Like I shared, this was a couple months ago, but it's like I was late. I usually pay off my credit card every month, and I was doing it manually, and I forgot, like I was a couple days late. And so
Mm.
I got charged a late fee. And like, so here I am, like this, personal finance expert, and I was late with paying my credit card. Right. And so, of course, it's just like, oh my gosh. But I shared that with other people to like let people know, like, we all make mistakes. We're going to continue to make mistakes. And so unless we figure out why that mistake was made or try to prevent it from happening again, then we're going to stay stuck in that cycle, right? So I think it's about recognizing and seeing that we all have these hangups, and they may be on different levels. It's going to be different. It's not going to be the same story for everyone. But I think once you can recognize that, and it's not just you alone that feels like a F up in this whole process, it makes you just, I think hopefully that gives you some solace or some a feeling of it's not just me, and let's work to it. And especially because we live in a society where this is pushed upon us. So when it comes to like a lot of people having student loan debt, especially like I'm an older millennial, and so I'm glad that there are resources and it's more education around student loans now for like my kids when they grow up. But like when I was going to college, there was none of that. And so a lot of us grew up in a generation where college was pushed on us as the next level, as the best way to get out of poverty or to change our status, which can be true for a lot of people, but we weren't taught about money. So of course, a lot of us got into debt with our student loans, got jobs that did not even pay a percentage of what the student loan was. And now we're inundated with social media and, big corporations spending billions of dollars on how to market to us. Just same way we can't put down our phone because like we're addicted to the likes and the messages, like that is all structured in a way where it's almost impossible to get out of that unless you can fight your way out of it. And I think so for a lot of people, money, we've been raised with this ideal about it, and a lot of things that are preventing us or try to stop us and keep us stuck. And so that's just to say, if you find yourself in a place where you feel behind, you feel like you didn't know anything. I mean, and there's some self-responsibility too, but just know that a lot of things were set up against you. Yeah. But if you're listening to this podcast and or watching this, like now is a start. So now there's things you can do to help start making changes to the life that you want.
Yeah, I feel that. I'm also an elder millennial, and I definitely found myself in the same position. I was the first person in my family to go to and graduate from college, and I think my parents were so excited at that prospect that we were just like, by any means possible. And it wasn't we weren't really thinking about the future, like, okay, once I get out, this is going to be like $1,000 a month payment, yeah. Living in New York City, which already the overhead is high. And to be completely transparent, my parents ended up getting into a car accident and they got a pretty sizable settlement, and my mom called me one day and was like, I paid off your student loans. And I was like, I just started crying on the street because I hadn't realized the weight of that debt that had been just like kind of sitting with me, and thinking about like, how am I ever going to pay off $60,000 in student loans? And it's like, we kind of anticipate that like we should just have this debt. Like it's normal for us to be carrying thousands upon thousands of dollars of debt on our backs because like seemingly everyone does, right? But that doesn't make it acceptable, and I think it is so great that there's a lot more resources around it now. I talk with a lot of my students who are interested in going to music school. I'm like, maybe go to school for business, and that's great. You could translate it into music,
Right.
But what you were saying about setting yourself up for the future, if someone is coming at this super cold, right? Like they have no info on starting this journey, what would you say a great first step for them would be to just start out?
So I think first thing is just to be aware of what's coming in and out in terms of money for you. So I'm assuming a lot of people are listening are creatives, right? And they may not, and I think that comes up most for people is like, maybe the money is not consistent, as if someone who has a W-2 job and kind of gets a dedicated paycheck that they know what it is every month. And so it's really important if you're in that situation, either situation, having a job or something that's a little bit more inconsistent, is to figure out what's coming in. Like at the minimum, if it's inconsistent, what is the minimum you can expect, right? Like that's the average that you've been getting for the past couple months that you can kind of worst case expect to get going forward. And then what is going out? Because you're going to have to adjust your expenses according to your income, what's coming in. So like with money, it's so funny because it's pretty simple, but obviously it's loaded. Like it's simple, but it's not easy
Right.
because it's like it's money coming in and it's money coming out. And the
Mhm.
difference of that is kind of how you get to the goals that you set for yourself.
Mhm.
So you can like take out the, whether you're saving goals or like buying a house, traveling, like literally it's just a difference of your income and expenses. And so a lot of us just need to get a handle on what's the income and what's the expenses
Mm.
and create a budget or spending plan, if you don't like the word budget, according to your current income, not with the income that you may get in the future or that you want, but like what is legitimately coming into your household and what is like, what are you spending on? And if you do that calculation, if you sit down for, 15, 20 minutes, an hour to do that, you may come to realize that, wow, like there are places that I'm spending that it's kind of just, this is killing my budget. I'm overspending actually. No wonder why my credit card is
Yeah.
increasing every month and I can't pay it off. Or you may find that you want to, that you're doing okay. So I think it's just a realization of what's happening.
I think the realization about what's happening is such a great point. I know, and if people are into apps, there's plenty of apps. I used an app called Albert, which I'm sure you've heard of, for a little while in like the beginning of my journey, which basically syncs to your bank account and your credit cards and shows you what you're spending every month. It shows you what's coming in, and it breaks it down into categories as well, like food, retail, tech, whatever. And then it's kind of confronting because you look at it and you're like, oh shit, wow, I did not realize this much money. I think like at one point we were eating out so much that like $1,200 a month was going to food for my husband and I. And saw that number and something like just switched in our brains and we were like, we don't need to do that.
Yeah, so I think that's great. That is kind of the realization for most people is I'm actually spending in a lot of places where like in the moment it feels good, but looking back at how it's stopping me from going forward is not good. So I need to make changes. So that look back or just realization is like step one. And then step two is actually now being proactive and creating a spending plan going forward. So then
Yeah.
after you see what's happening, according to how much money is coming in, how do you break down your expenses? So the mandatory things that you need to pay for to live, your housing expenses, food, which can still be adjusted because you don't have to like go out every day, and like bills, right? Like what it takes for you to actually live that are mandatory that you need to pay. What is that? And then how much do you have left over for the discretionary things that you do enjoy, like going out to eat with friends or manicures and pedicures? I know some people actually include that in like that's their mandatory. And so I just feel like getting real about how you want to spend going forward is important, because then you'll kind of have to play this game of, okay, I have to adjust now because it says I have $2,000 coming in and I'm spending normally 2,500. So what needs to be cut out or cut back to be able to reach like in time inside this limit? And by the way, I know we're only focusing on expenses, and that's because I typically feel like right away someone can like just cut out things that are not like helpful. But there is a bigger side to that, which is income.
Yeah.
And I think income is honestly the biggest driving, fastest way that you could reach your goals, like increasing that. But so some of that could be quick, but some of that takes a little bit longer. So I do want to just make sure I say that, because I'm not just expense, like cut everything out. Because I do
Yeah.
feel like some people are not making enough. Some people literally like they are not earning enough for their family to even pay for the basics. And they want to enjoy life. And so even if they go out, once for that month, it can put them off of their budget.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to kind of just recognize if you're at that stage, like literally, are you making even enough to cover your expenses? And if not, that becomes a different conversation about how can you increase your income or what kind of support can you get otherwise to get there.
No, that's a great point. And I think it's also a good point to talk about not just kind of stripping things away too,
Yeah.
because I think that we do. I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, but I think a lot of us live in this lack mentality where we think like we can't have like nice things, or like it's like a punishment for us to be like stripping these things away. But I think what you were saying about being intentional about setting aside money for you to have those fun things in your life that bring you joy. I know when we started doing that, I had to do some thought work around it to make it kind of like a game. And once I started paying down my credit cards, I it felt so good, and the peace that came with that was so worthwhile, that it also brought more joy to when I did spend on the things that I wanted to spend on, because I felt like I deserved it. And I don't know if that's the right headspace to be in, but just for me that worked. But I don't know if that will work for everyone, but
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think we live, it's like it's either or. I mean, I think you need to approach it from an expense side to just be intentional. So again, I'm not advocating that people like cut out the things that really bring them joy. But if it's preventing you, if you're realizing that you don't have enough money to pay off that debt or to make more than a minimum payment, then something has to be adjusted. So it can be your expenses and or your income. So you can either spend less or you can earn more or do both.
Mhm.
And you just have to figure out at what comes first, how quickly can you do which, so that you can get to your goals. And by the way, this is not a journey based on speed. I think that's also something that people kind of get caught up in, is because we want the instant gratification of being debt free or having all the money invested, but we have to think like, how long have you been on this earth and have not known these things, and how long has it taken you to get into debt, right?
Yeah.
So don't expect that tomorrow it's all going to be gone. Like, it's a process to work towards that. So
Definitely, and it's very fluid too.
yeah.
Based on where you are in your life and what you're trying to do. And I took your quiz on your site. I'm a
Ah,
candidate, apparently,
yay.
so I'm working on paying off debt while also building wealth. But it is, something I noticed when I did that was talking about carrying intentional, like high debt, and so like your student loans, your mortgage, things like that too. So I think yeah, people don't feel like you have to pay off your mortgage tomorrow, but
Yeah, no, and I think that's important too, like that you have to also take into account your personality and maybe your experience. And so there are things that I wanted to do, or I thought in the past, like 5 years ago, that I think differently about now. And so I'm comfortable with debt for the most part. Like, everything usually goes on my credit card every month, and I pay it off, because I like credit. I like the points that I get
yeah.
from that. And I think there's levels to it in a way where if you're struggling, so I have these like stages to reach financial independence. And like the first stage is you're literally just trying to like get to a place where you're not overspending and getting into the red every month. Like, in that case, you shouldn't be deploying debt strategies to help fuel you going forward, like to get credit card points. Like, your goal is to get stable, right?
Yeah.
But there's these other levels that you get to where you're stable, you have some control over your money, over your credit card spending, if you are comfortable with credit cards, and you can use that now to your advantage to help you towards your goals. And
Mhm.
so I think just because you're in one place now doesn't mean you can't work your way to the place now where you can start using these things to help you get ahead, like the rich people do, right? So
Mhm.
don't feel like, because if you're in one place you'll be there forever. You can work your way up to a place and do different strategies to help you ultimately.
Totally. And I feel like that's been about a 5-year journey for me, because I feel like when I first started thinking about this, I was in that place where it was like, just like, okay, let's clean this up. Let's, get these credit cards off my back. And then it's at a place now where it's like more fluid. My income has increased and my expenses have gone down. So I'm able to kind of use that money in a different way or think about it differently. But that's, for anyone listening, that took me about 5 years, so it does take time. And I think we're so used to just seeing like these instant things on social media. It's like, oh, it just happens, right? And you don't see the work
Right.
that goes into it behind the scenes. um, but last question, it's how do you think we can help people stay on this track of financial wellness once they've started the journey?
Yeah, so it's going to be really easy to get discouraged unless you reinforce
Mm,
the behaviors and the mindset, and you surround yourself with inspiration, because the journey is long,
yeah.
right there, and it can take a while, right? Like, so maybe one of your goals is to get out of credit card debt, but when you do the math on how much additional you can pay towards that, it's going to take 2-3 years. That's a long time, right? So it's important to enjoy the journey on your way, like set up goalposts where you're celebrating your wins, which I really like talking about, where it's not just like you pay off debt and like it's done, because there's always going to be another goal you set for yourself, right? And so it's about how can you feel good while paying off the debt? Like how can you reward yourself in a way that doesn't set you back?
Mm-hmm.
And so my biggest thing is figuring out what are you doing to enjoy the journey. And surprising to some people, it's just like, it is fun actually when you can connect, like whether your debt is going down or your investments are going up, when you can connect to that. I remember when I first started, I used to like check my spreadsheets every day. I loved seeing like what was possible and like how much progress I was making. It became a game for me. And that can really happen. I know some people are like, really? Like, how could that be fun? But it does get that way when you're starting to like see things happen and snowball. So find ways to make it fun. I think, for me, when I was commuting before I quit my job to do this full time, I was listening to podcasts that inspired me on my commute. I was reading blogs. I was getting fired up with the social content that helped like keep me going. And so it was really nice seeing people who were far further ahead of me, or even like at the same place but making strides, and that kept me going. So I always say too, like surround yourself with a supportive community, because sometimes you don't have that in person. Maybe you can if you kind of recruit some friends to do it with you, but if not, like social media is like awful for a lot of things, but it's really good for a lot of things too. Like you can find, like if you search the hashtag on Instagram, like debt-free community, you'll find tons of accounts where people are sharing their, their journey of paying off debt, or podcasts like mine, right? Like that you can listen to that help inspire you. So one, I think just getting that education and inspiration, working that into your kind of media routine is going to be helpful. And just, realistically setting goals for yourself while acknowledging that things may go wrong or set you back, like this pandemic, like who could have accounted for this, even as much as you could plan and set your best foot forward. And so having grace in the moment and knowing that you're just doing the best you can. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I know I use an app called Qapital, where it just rounds up the dollar on anything I use my debit card on. And I have a few different savings accounts there. So it's like money I don't even notice I'm saving, but I have one that's like for a trip that my husband and I want to go on. And it's like a way, I see that as like a game for, an extra way to save towards something really fun to kind of keep me inspired and keep me on that journey.
Right. And don't be afraid. I mean, there are tons of apps. Like I use the budget app that I use right now is called WhyNab, YNAB. You need a budget. But there are tons of apps that you can find. And the thing about it is, don't be afraid to try something and just give it a shot, because I do have the personality where I kind of want to know things are long term. So I'm like, I don't want to try it and then I don't like it. And then I like spend all this time trying to do it and it doesn't work. Right. Like that is my initial like approach to things. But I've learned over time that you won't know it until you try it. And so do your research. Like there's such a wealth of information on the internet for free. Of course, there are paid things you can do, which I also recommend investing in yourself. So I would say that while we are looking forward to investing and doing all these things, that our biggest investment is us, right? Is into our mindset and our education. Because once you have knowledge, once you have confidence, no one can take that away from you. Right. And so there are so many ways to start, right? Like, so you want to start investing, but you don't understand. I know there are tons of sites, but just like go to the reputable ones. Like what is investing? What does it mean? Okay. What is the first step to investing? And do some research on it. Like there's tons of information. And again, podcasts and books that help and can show you that. You just have to invest the time and sometimes the money, and a lot of times it is free, just to learn the basics. And don't be afraid to try things. Like you're not going to get it all right, as long as you're not betting your whole, like your house, right, or your savings. Like you will survive, you will be okay, but you won't know that until you take that step.
Totally. And speaking of great resources for all first timers listening, you can go to Jamila's website, journeytolaunch.com. You can take her money quiz, find out where you are and that, and listen to her awesome podcast. And you're working on a book right now too, right?
I am. It's funny because it's like I haven't made a public like announcement. I've been hinting at it. So like it's been hinted at. I've mentioned it like briefly on a recent podcast. But I am, like, this year, the goal is to write my book, and I can't wait to share more about that process, because ultimately, like, the podcast is a great way. The Journey to Launch podcast is a great way where people can like get started and inspired. But I really wanted like a physical form of that, where like you can literally like sit down and read and see and get this resource to help you figure out where to start, how to keep going, how to figure out what is financial independence? What does it mean to you? What is freedom on your way to independence? And so that's the book that I will be writing this year. And I'll, of course, Danny, keep you updated on my progress on that.
I'm so excited to read it. Thank you so much for doing this. I just know that you are doing such important work, and you know, it really is such a we've talked about this before. Like, it really is a journey to freedom, and it that is so deep on so many levels. And I'm just excited for people to, maybe this is the first time they're even considering this and thinking that like it could be for them too. It's not just for people who are already like established financially.
Right.
So I just am so grateful for what you're doing, for your time today, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Danny, for having me.
Oh, wow. I'm living in a rainbow.
How brilliant is Jamila, right? I mean, I always feel like I learn something new every time I talk with her or listen to an episode of her podcast or read one of her Instagram posts. So if you also want to be a rock star with your finances like Jamila, you can follow her on Instagram at Journey to Launch or at Jamila Souffrant. You can also take her quiz to figure out where you are in your financial journey and how to move forward on her website, journeytolaunch.com. And you can listen to her podcast, Journey to Launch, anywhere you listen to podcasts. Our theme song is Living in a Rainbow by Royal Cinema, and First Time for Everything is produced by Two Sheilas Productions. If you like what you hear, it would mean so much to us if you took a second to give us a rating and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts, so we can just keep growing the party over here and be the fun, awesome, curious group of first-timer people that we are. Thank you guys so much for listening, and remember, it is never too late for your first time.
I'm living in a cloud.